There is a strange moment that happens when someone finally reaches six figures in savings or income because for years they imagined that number as a kind of financial finish line, a place where stress disappears and life finally feels stable. Yet when they arrive there, many discover something deeply confusing. The anxiety remains, the pressure continues, and the sense of financial security still feels slightly out of reach. What changed was not only the number itself, but the economic environment surrounding it, because the meaning of money is never fixed. $100,000 once represented a completely different level of purchasing power, lifestyle freedom, and psychological comfort than it does today. And understanding why reveals something important about how modern financial systems quietly reshape expectations without most people noticing. For decades, six figures carried symbolic weight because it created separation from ordinary financial struggle. In the late 20th century, crossing into that income range often meant a household could comfortably afford a home, support children, save consistently, travel occasionally, and still feel margin at the end of the month. The number itself became culturally associated with success, stability, and upward mobility, not because of the digits alone, but because of what those digits could actually purchase in the real economy. Money only matters relative to cost, and this is where inflation quietly changes the psychological landscape over time. Inflation is often described in technical language involving percentages, interest rates, or central bank policy, but at its core, inflation simply means that the purchasing power of money slowly declines. The same amount of currency buys fewer goods, fewer services, and fewer years of security than it once did. The difficult part psychologically is that people still anchor their minds to old financial milestones even after the economy has fundamentally shifted underneath them. Someone who grew up hearing that $100,000 was wealthy may still emotionally believe that to be true, even while modern housing costs, healthcare expenses, education prices, and daily living costs tell a very different story. If we look mathematically at inflation across several decades, the shift becomes much clearer. A household earning $100,000 in the mid-1990s occupied a very different financial position than a household earning the same amount today. Adjusted for inflation, that older six-figure salary would require significantly more money now to maintain equivalent purchasing power. Yet culturally, the number itself remained frozen in public imagination. The symbol survived even while the underlying economics changed. Genu math bot watch to always prefetch FEV PV1. This simple inflation formula explains much of the illusion. As prices compound upward year after year, even modest inflation rates create massive long-term changes in purchasing power. A 3% annual inflation rate may sound small in isolation, but over 20 or 30 years, it dramatically alters what a fixed amount of money can actually do. The economy changes gradually enough that people emotionally adapt without fully realizing how much ground has shifted beneath them. This creates what economists sometimes call money illusion, where people focus on nominal numbers instead of real purchasing power. Someone may feel financially successful because their salary reached a culturally important benchmark, while simultaneously feeling financially constrained because their actual costs rose faster than expected. This contradiction creates enormous psychological tension, especially for middle-class households, who technically earn more money than previous generations, but often experience less stability relative to essential expenses. Housing provides one of the clearest examples. In many countries, home prices have increased far faster than median wages over the last several decades. What once required a manageable percentage of income now consumes enormous portions of household budgets, particularly in urban areas where economic opportunities are concentrated. The result is that many people achieving six-figure incomes still feel locked out of milestones that previous generations reached on lower inflation-adjusted salaries. The number stays the same while the economic reality transformed completely. At the same time, modern economies introduced new forms of recurring financial pressure that earlier generations faced less intensely. Subscription models, digital consumption, lifestyle inflation, rising insurance costs, and increasingly individualized financial responsibility all combine to create persistent cash flow pressure. Retirement systems shifted more risk onto individuals, education became dramatically more expensive, and healthcare costs expanded faster than overall inflation in many regions. Financial stress no longer comes only from low income, it increasingly comes from systems where baseline participation itself became more expensive. Psychologically, humans are not naturally equipped to track slow economic change over decades. People notice sudden losses immediately, but gradual purchasing power erosion often goes undetected because lifestyles adapt incrementally. A smaller home, delayed savings, longer working years, reduced ownership, and increasing reliance on debt can slowly become normalized without people consciously recognizing how much standards have shifted historically. This is one reason why many households feel financially squeezed despite objectively earning more money than previous generations on paper. There is also a social comparison effect that intensifies the experience. In digital environments, people constantly encounter curated displays of wealth, consumption, travel, and lifestyle performance. Expectations rise faster than income because visibility expands endlessly. Financial satisfaction becomes psychologically unstable when comparison targets continuously move upward. Someone earning a strong salary may still feel behind because their perception of normal living standards has been reshaped by constant exposure to extreme examples. The deeper lesson is not that $100,000 is meaningless because it still represents significant financial progress for many households around the world. The real lesson is that financial numbers cannot be understood in isolation from systems. Income only matters relative to inflation, asset prices, debt structures, taxation, geographic costs, and behavioral habits. Wealth is less about symbolic milestones and more about resilience, purchasing power, and long-term flexibility within changing economic conditions. Historically, societies have gone through similar psychological shifts during periods of monetary expansion and rising costs. In different eras, populations repeatedly experienced the unsettling realization that traditional financial benchmarks no longer produce the same outcomes they once did. The numbers remained culturally important long after the economy evolved past them. This pattern appears again and again because humans attach emotional meaning to fixed milestones even while systems remain dynamic. Understanding this changes how people approach money psychologically. Instead of chasing culturally inherited numbers, individuals begin focusing more on ratios and systems. Savings rates matter more than appearance. Asset ownership matters more than income signaling. Flexibility matters more than prestige. The goal shifts away from reaching a symbolic threshold and toward building economic stability that can adapt across decades of changing conditions. In many ways, the most important financial realization is that economic systems are always moving. Inflation changes the value of currency, technology changes labor markets, institutions change incentives, and culture changes expectations. Numbers that once represented freedom may eventually represent survival, while entirely new thresholds emerge over time. People who understand this tend to make calmer decisions because they stop treating financial milestones as permanent truths and start viewing them as temporary measurements inside evolving systems. That perspective does not eliminate financial pressure, but it does remove some of the confusion surrounding modern money. $100,000 feels different today, not because people became irrational, lazy, or irresponsible, but because the economic environment itself changed dramatically beneath a number that society never psychologically updated. And once that becomes visible, many financial frustrations begin to make far more sense.